Colombia, President Gustavo Petro met U.S. Representative John McNamara amidst the crisis sparked by U.S. President Donald Trump's insults and threats. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced that a fourth public consultation will be held on next November 23rd. And Zionist occupation forces in the Gaza Strip are keeping thousands of families displaced from the eastern part of the territory despite the ceasefire agreement. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Monday, a meeting was held between the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, and the United States representative in Bogota, John McNamara. The dialogue took place amidst the crisis unleashed by the insults and threats made by U.S. President Donald Trump against his Colombian counterpart. At the end of the meeting, held at the Casa de Nariño, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio, assured that sincere dialogue will always lead to solutions. However, no details of the meeting were released. In this context, the White House's threat to impose new tariffs on Colombia did not materialize. Before entering the meeting with the Washington envoy, President Petro assured that he was going to demand, not concede. For his part, the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, has also publicly blamed U.S. President Donald Trump for the ongoing situation in Venezuela, citing Washington's economic sanctions as the root cause of mass migration and economic collapse. In a recent interview, Petro firmly stated that Colombia's military would not participate in any U.S.-led invasion of Venezuela, distancing his administration from potential regional conflict. Petro accused Trump of using punitive measures to strangle Venezuela's economy, leading to widespread displacement and instability across Latin America. The remarks come amid a sharp escalation in diplomatic tensions between Bogota and Washington. Petro also denounced what he described as a U.S. policy of domination over Colombia and the region, masked as anti-narcotics operation.
The person primarily responsible is Mr. Trump, and it must be said that Mr. Trump governed before. So look at what happened there. There is almost a war between Colombia and Venezuela. Mr. Trump is angry that I don't support the Americans with the Colombian army to invade Venezuela. No, sir. What kind of stupid Colombian would think of helping to invade where their cousins, their nephews, their Colombian people are, where there are 4 million people to be killed like in Gaza?
During the interview, President Petro assured that diplomatic relations with the United States were escalating in tone at the same time that bombs were falling on the Gaza Strip and missiles were being fired into the Caribbean Sea.
And the tone was rising as more bombs fell, and more children were killed in Gaza, as more and more Latin Americans were chained and handcuffed on airplanes and expelled as if they were unwanted dogs in the United States, and as they began to threaten us to the point that the same missiles that fall on Gaza also fall in the Caribbean Sea near us. We investigated whether it is more territorial or not. They did not want to give us the coordinates, so in the face of that, a president keeps silent and kneel, or a president speaks for the dignity of humanity, not just for his people. That is what I have done.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro reiterated the government's commitment to defending Latin American unity, reaffirming his support for Colombia in the face of U.S. threats.
En el corazón, nosotros somos Colombia.
In our hearts we are Colombia. The great Colombia that was founded on the Orinoco. By Liberator Simón Antonio de la Santísima Trinidad Bolívar Palacios y Blanco, our liberator. And Colombia knows that we are one, twin brothers, and whatever happens to Colombia, happens to Venezuela, and whatever happens in Venezuela happens to Colombia. As a military officer from the Colombian Armed Forces wrote to me 2 weeks ago, if they attack Venezuela, they attack Colombia. We are one homeland in our hearts, and these are not empty words. I know what I'm saying.
Por decir lo que estoy diciendo, sé lo que estoy.
And UN experts denounced on Tuesday the coercive intervention in Venezuela by the United States in Special Procedures news release of the United Nations Human Rights Council. According to the release, covert action and threats of using armed force against the government of Venezuela by the United States violate Venezuela's sovereignty and the UN Charter. The experts describe these actions as an extremely dangerous escalation with grave implications for peace and security in the Caribbean region. They stated that the use of lethal force in international waters without proper legal basis violates the international law of the sea and amounts to extrajudicial executions. Preparations for covert or direct military action against another sovereign state constitute an even graver breach of the UN Charter. Finally, they underscored that any attempt to impose regime change by external means also infringes upon the right to self-determination. The long history of external interventions in Latin America must not be repeated. And on Tuesday, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced that a fourth public consultation will be held on November 23rd. The main objective of the consultation is to call on the people to prepare and propose the projects they wish to implement in their communities, to which the president referred as an example of direct democracy. The first national public consultation was held in April, where 4,500 community projects were selected for funding to strengthen the role of people's power. In this regard, President Nicolás Maduro denounced foreign campaigns against democracy promoted by former President Hugo Chávez Frías, while demanded respect for the people of Venezuela.
Este año tuvimos la primera consulta el 2 de febrero.
This year we had the first consultation on February 2nd, the second consultation on April 27th, the third consultation on July 27th, and there is one consultation left. And since I have already the funds, I am calling the fourth communal consultation for the general elections on Sunday, November 23rd. All neighbors to vote for their communal projects in an exercise of direct democracy.
We now have a first break coming up. First, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Monday in Cuba, the Vietnam-Cuba Collaboration Project for the Development of Rice Cultivation concluded. The project was recognized for its significant contributions, training more than 40,000 producers and for the development of 4 new high-yield varieties. The event was attended by Cuban authorities and representatives of the Vietnamese government, led by Ambassador Lee Quang Long, and it was emphasized that cooperation has been essential for strengthening food security in the country. The project was celebrated in an environment of mutual achievement and contributed to knowledge in crucial areas such as local development, renewable energy, investment, and agricultural extension.
Several achievements have been made, including the consolidation of a rice production strategy for 2025 to 2030 and efficient planning of irrigation activities, an agricultural extension system with 13 regional centers and more than 150 trained technicians, the introduction and validation of new high-yield varieties from Vietnam, and the implementation of various innovative technologies that have a daily impact on Cuban farms.
In this context, Vietnamese Ambassador Lee Quang Long emphasized the historical solidarity between the two nations.
acompaña y apoya a Cuba durante mucho tiempo.
Vietnam has always accompanied and supported Cuba for a long time, especially in the most difficult times, and a very important goal for us is to help Cuba guarantee food security. Therefore, the party and government of Vietnam have decided to carry out this project over the course of 23 years. The impressive results of the project show success. With much effort, the commitments of the Vietnamese government party and the goal of food security.
En la meta de la seguridad alimentaria.
In the context of the national strike in Ecuador now in its 30th day, international organizations warn that the government of Daniel Noboa is violating the right of indigenous community to protest. Human rights violations that breach international standards and national laws have been reported during the protest. In this regard, international organizations pointed out that the law enforcement forces infringe the law of legitimate use of force and the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which oblige the state to guarantee the right to peaceful social protest and establish limits on repression. In this scenario, international bodies demanded impartial investigations, transparency, and dialogue to prevent further abuses.
Insecurity in the country has worsened. We are in the most violent year in our history, with one death every 56 minutes. Where did that 3% bet go? It went into the hands of the International Monetary Fund. It went into the hands of the big monopolies. But not to the great needs of the Ecuadorian people. That is why we students will remain in the streets to protest against anti-popular measures and also to defend public universities.
Well, first of all, I would like to tell the President that today, more than ever, we are calling on the student body to unite in order to combat these anti-popular neoliberal measures that affect all Ecuadorians, measures that we can see such as the increase in VAT, which was intended for security, but we continue to be one of the most dangerous countries in Latin America, and we see a homicide rate that is growing more and more, so these measures make it clear to us that the only thing this government wants is to make life precarious.
In Argentina, President Javier Milei enacted emergency laws on patriotic health and university funding, but suspended their implementation and ordered Congress to determine the sources of their funding. The government followed the same pattern as it did with the disability emergency law. Congressman Esteban Paulon announced the expansion of the complaint for abuse of authority and breach of public office against Javier Milei, Guillermo Francos, Mario Lugones, and Sandra Petovelo. Although Milei now rejects the allocation of funds, just a few days ago, Liberty Advances asked the electoral chamber to reprint all the ballots for the October 26 elections. The request, rejected by the judges, would have cost the national government millions. On Tuesday, university unions, workers at Garahan Hospital, and people with disability will once more take to the streets to protest against Milei's policies. And in the United States, the Senate failed on Monday for the 11th consecutive time to approve a temporary funding bill to end the government shutdown, which has been ongoing for 20 days, with no visible agreements between Republicans and Democrats. The legislative session was marked by the absence of 7 senators, and the deadlock continues because the Democrats demand the inclusion of an extension of Obamacare subsidies, which the Republicans oppose, claiming without evidence that this program benefits undocumented individuals. The 20-day government shutdown has affected more than 1.3 million federal employees who are working without pay, while the administration of President Donald Trump has fired more than 4,000 employees from various agencies, and the matter is currently being resolved in the courts. We now have our second short break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. A final break, don't go away. Welcome back. A thick layer of smog blanketed India's capital on Tuesday, a day after millions celebrated the Hindu festival of Diwali with fireworks that sent air pollution levels soaring to hazardous levels across the city. According to health authorities, the chemical components of fireworks combined with the seasonal pollution and weather conditions raised the air quality index above 350, a level considered severe and dangerous to breathe, according to the World Health Organization. Last week, the Supreme Court of India eased the general ban on firecrackers in New Delhi during Diwali, allowing the limited use of eco-friendly firecrackers that emit less pollutants. The court had said they could be used during specific hours from Saturday to Tuesday, but as in previous years, the rule was mostly ignored. And the Taklamakan Desert in northwest China has undergone a remarkable transformation. After more than 4 decades of work, the country has managed to close a green belt of more than 2,700 kilometers around the so-called Sea of Death. Our correspondent Bruno Falsi brings us all the details.
Greetings, colleagues of teleSUR. I am in the Chinese capital to inform you this time that satellite images confirm the success of the project that halted the advance, covering more than 330,000 square kilometers, is now surrounded by an ecological barrier of vegetation capable of resisting erosion and stabilize the dunes. On the northern edge of the desert, the Aishiman Lake area transformed from a source of sandstorms into a verdant ecosystem. Recycled water was used there to irrigate more than 30,000 hectares of ecological forest, increasing the forest cover from 4% to 45%. And restoring more than 18% of the wetlands. Simultaneously, in the southeast of the Taklamakan Desert, thousands of trees were planted, where prevalently a desertified land. And in the far south, large solar energy projects and agricultural plantation are now helping to halt the advance of the sands, combining reforestation and energy transition. Of the sands, combining reforestation and energy transition. With this completion of the Green Belt by the end of 2024, China now managed to contain the expansion of the country's largest desert, but also turn it into a global symbol of climate adaptation and sustainable resource management. With the news, we return to La Habana, Cuba.
In the Gaza Strip, Zionist occupation forces are keeping thousands of families displaced from the eastern part of the territory despite the ceasefire agreement. As a result of massive forced displacements, the population is crowded into the central part of the city towards the western side near Al-Shifa Hospital and other areas of the Gaza Strip. This concentration of population exacerbates overcrowding and puts pressure on the remaining public services, including sanitary facilities. In this scenario, the demarcation known as the Yellow Line, which marks the Israeli army's withdrawal zone, still leaves around 58% of the Gaza Strip under its control. Zionist forces said that anyone who crossed the line would be considered a threat. And U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Israel to urge Prime Minister Netanyahu not to abandon the ceasefire deal amid ongoing Israeli strikes on Gaza in direct violation of the truce. On Monday, U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Israeli Prime Minister one day after the most deadly Israeli attacks on Gaza since the ceasefire began. On Sunday, Israel dropped 153 tons of bombs on the enclave, killing at least 45 Palestinians, including a journalist. On Tuesday, Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov rejected the call to freeze the fighting at the current line of combat with Ukraine and insisted Moscow was seeking long-term settlement to the conflict.
Russia has not changed its position compared to the understandings reached during the extensive negotiations between Putin and Trump in Alaska. Those understandings are based on the reached agreement, which President Trump aptly expressed when he said that what is needed is a long-term, sustainable peace, not an immediate ceasefire that would lead nowhere. We remain fully committed to this formula, and I reaffirmed it yesterday in my conversation with Marco Rubio. Those who are now trying to persuade our U.S. colleagues to change their position and to abandon the pursuit of a long-term, sustainable settlement, urging instead to simply call for a halt and let history judge later. We know who they are. These are Zelensky's European patrons and sponsors.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.